Please hit that like button if you believe in the magic that children bring into our lives. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Have you ever wondered what would happen if the past you tried so hard to bury suddenly knocked on your door, bringing not just ghosts, but also a child you never thought possible? Prepare your heart, because this is the story of Robert, a man who had everything, except the one thing that truly mattered. For weeks, no remedy, no story, no specialist could get the twin boys to sleep, until the new nanny did something, and everything changed. "I can't go on like this, Mr. Maxwell," exclaimed Brenda, the third nanny to resign in less than a month. "The children don't sleep, they don't obey, and frankly, they need help I can't give them." Robert Maxwell rubbed his temples tiredly, watching the woman pack her belongings. Upstairs, the twins' inconsolable crying pierced through the walls of the mansion located in Beverly Hills, California, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods. "Please, Brenda, just one more week," he pleaded, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. "I'll increase your salary." "It's not about money, sir," she replied, closing her suitcase. "Your children need stability. They need—" She stopped, biting her tongue. "They need their mother," Robert thought, mentally completing the sentence Brenda didn't dare utter, as if he could ever forget. The twins' screams intensified. Robert closed his eyes for an instant, taking a deep breath. At 38, he had built a real estate empire from scratch, negotiated with the toughest businessmen in North America. But he felt completely helpless before two 4-year-olds who simply couldn't sleep at night. "I understand," he finally said. "James will pay you until the end of the month." When Brenda left, Robert slowly ascended the marble staircase, each step heavier than the last. He found Leo and Liam on their bedroom floor, surrounded by scattered toys, tears streaming down their identical faces. His heart ached, as it always did when he saw his sons suffer. "Daddy, we want Mommy," sobbed Leo, the twin who always spoke first. "Mommy used to sing to us," added Liam, hugging a teddy bear tightly. Robert knelt beside them, ignoring how his expensive Italian suit wrinkled against the floor. "I know, little ones," he said, pulling them to his chest. "I know." That night, like every night for months, Robert spent hours trying to get the twins to sleep. He read them stories, sang to them in his terrible businessman's voice, accustomed to giving orders, not lullabies. He even lay between them in the enormous children's bed, specially designed for two. Nothing worked. At 3 in the morning, when they finally succumbed to exhaustion, Robert returned to his study. With his face buried in his hands, he looked at the framed photograph on his desk, and then flipped it over, unable to hold that gaze any longer. He picked up his phone and called Chloe, his personal assistant. "I need another nanny," he said without a greeting. "Tomorrow." "Mr. Maxwell, it's 3 in the morning," Chloe replied, her voice surprisingly clear. "You think I don't know that?" he retorted, harsher than he intended. "Sorry, Chloe, I haven't slept well." "I understand, sir, but we've exhausted all the premium nanny agencies in the city. Perhaps we should consider—" "What?" Robert asked impatiently. "My niece just moved to the city from a small town in Arizona. She has experience caring for children, although she's never worked for someone like you." Robert let out a dry laugh. "Someone like me? You mean a disastrous father who can't get his kids to sleep?" "I meant someone of your position," Chloe clarified diplomatically. "Jessica is straightforward, but she has a gift with children. She worked in a daycare in her hometown for years. Does she have references? Training. She studied early childhood education, though she didn't finish her degree due to financial difficulties. As for references, I can vouch for her personally." "Oof." Robert ran a hand through his hair, messing it up. Under other circumstances, he would never consider hiring anyone without an impeccable resume and multiple interviews. But he was desperate. "Bring her tomorrow. he finally conceded. First thing. At 8 o'clock the next morning, as Robert reviewed contracts in his study after another almost sleepless night, James, the butler, announced the arrival of Chloe and her niece. "Send them in," he ordered, without looking up from his documents. Chloe's heels resonated against the marble floor, followed by softer steps. When Robert finally looked up, he saw a young woman who seemed absolutely out of place in the mansion's opulence. She wore simple jeans, a plain white blouse, and her brown hair was tied back in a practical ponytail. She wore no makeup, except perhaps a touch of lip gloss. What caught his attention, however, were her eyes. Large, expressive, amber-colored, with a warmth that seemed to light up the room. "Mr. Maxwell, I'd like to introduce my niece, Jessica Miller," Chloe said. "Good morning, sir," Jessica greeted, with a slight accent that betrayed her rural origins. "Thank you for seeing me." Robert stood and extended his hand mechanically, surprised by the firmness of Jessica's grip. "Chloe has told me about your experience with children," he said, studying her with the analytical gaze he reserved for evaluating potential investments. "Do you know why you're here?" Jessica nodded. "My aunt explained that your children have difficulty sleeping. They're 4-year-old twins." "Correct?" "Yes," Robert confirmed. "Leo and Liam. And difficulty sleeping is an understatement. They haven't had a full night's sleep in months, which means neither have I. They've scared away 3 professional nannies." He expected to see apprehension on Jessica's face. Instead, he saw determination. "I'd like to meet them," she said simply. Robert raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the young woman's confidence. "Follow me." As they ascended the stairs to the twins' room, Robert found himself evaluating Jessica from a professional perspective. She didn't seem like the type of person he would normally hire. No connections, no polish of expensive schools, no wardrobe that screamed, "I belong in this world." And yet, there was something about her presence that was comforting. Before opening the door, Robert stopped her. "I must warn you, they're having a difficult morning. The previous nanny left yesterday, and that's upset them even more." Jessica smiled, a genuine smile that illuminated her face. "Children have good reasons for their behaviors, Mr. Maxwell. They just need someone to discover them." Robert opened the door to find a battlefield. Toys scattered everywhere, bedding ripped from the beds, and the twins in the center of the chaos, their faces red from crying. 2 miniature versions of himself, with the same dark hair and the same intense eyes, currently swollen from tears. He expected the usual reaction: shock, concern, or that condescending, "poor things" gesture. But Jessica did something completely unexpected. She sat on the floor, exactly where she was, crossing her legs as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Jessica. I love trains. Do you like trains?" The twins, surprised by this strange adult who had joined them on the floor instead of trying to pick them up, stopped their sobbing momentarily. "We have a big train," Liam said after a moment of silence, pointing to a corner where an elaborate toy train track lay. "Really?" Jessica responded with genuine interest. "Would you show me how it works?" To Robert's astonishment, Leo got up and took Jessica's hand, guiding her to the train. Liam quickly followed. In a matter of minutes, all 3 were sitting around the track, with Jessica asking questions about each car, each miniature building, every small detail of the railway world the twins had built. Robert remained at the door, watching with a mixture of perplexity and something else, something he couldn't name. The sobbing had ceased, replaced by enthusiastic explanations and, occasionally, laughter. Jessica looked up and met Robert's gaze. For an instant, something passed between them, a silent recognition. "We'll be fine, Mr. Maxwell," she said softly. You can leave us alone if you have work to do." She was a stranger, a young woman from a small town with no impressive credentials, and yet Robert found himself nodding, instinctively trusting her. "I'll leave them in your hands," he replied, surprised by the sudden lightness he felt in his chest. "I'll be in my study if you need me." As he descended the stairs, Robert heard something he hadn't heard in months, the clear, carefree laughter of his children. He stopped dead, a hand on the banister, letting the sound envelop him. Perhaps, just perhaps, Chloe was right about her niece. What do you think is the something else Robert felt when he saw Jessica interact with his sons? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The day passed with unusual tranquility in the Maxwell mansion. From his study, Robert could occasionally hear laughter and animated conversations, sounds that had been absent for too long. Several times, he found himself distracted from his video conferences, his gaze drifting towards the door, as if he could see through it, to where his children were, with the new nanny. In the mid-afternoon, unable to contain his curiosity, Robert decided to casually pass by where they were. He found them in the garden, under the shade of a century-old oak tree. Jessica had spread a blanket on the perfectly manicured lawn, and all three were sitting on it, engrossed in what looked like an art project. "Daddy, look what we're doing!" Leo exclaimed when he saw him, with an enthusiasm that tugged at Robert's heart. He approached and saw that they were painting stones collected from the garden, transforming them into colorful animals. "Jessica says that in her hometown, they make alebrijes," Liam explained, carefully pronouncing the new word. "We're making stone alebrijes." "They're very beautiful," Robert commented, genuinely impressed by the level of detail his children's tiny fingers had achieved under Jessica's guidance. "It's a technique I learned from my grandmother," she explained, looking up. "The children have natural talent." Their eyes met, and again Robert felt that strange connection, as if Jessica could see beyond his facade of a successful businessman, to the vulnerable, tired man hiding behind it. "Would you join us?" she asked, offering him a paintbrush with a smile that seemed to contain a silent challenge. Robert hesitated. He had 3 more video conferences scheduled, documents to review, multi-million-dollar decisions to make. "Daddy, please," Leo begged. "Just for a little while," Liam added. Robert surprised himself by unbuttoning his shirt cuff and sitting down on the blanket. "Just for a little while," he conceded, taking the paintbrush Jessica offered him, their fingers brushing briefly. The little while turned into an hour, during which Robert Maxwell, the feared real estate shark of California, completely forgot about his business while clumsily painting a jaguar-shaped stone. His children's laughter when they compared his work to theirs, noticeably better, was the most beautiful sound he had heard in months. When he finally remembered his commitments and stood up to return to his study, he found himself inexplicably light, as if he had left an invisible weight on that blanket in the garden. "Thank you," he said to Jessica, with a sincerity that surprised him. "I haven't seen them like this in a long time." She simply nodded, as if she understood perfectly. "The real test will be tonight," she replied pragmatically. "Sleep is sacred, for them as well as for you." Dinner passed with the same unusual peace. The twins, normally restless at the enormous dining table, ate without protesting, and even animatedly told their father everything they had done during the day with Jessica. She had excused herself to dine in the kitchen with the staff, despite Robert's invitation to join them. "It's better to establish clear boundaries at the beginning," she had explained softly. "For the children, it's important to understand my role." When it was bedtime, Robert went up to the twins' room with a mixture of hope and skepticism. The last few weeks had been a battle every night, with crying, pleading, and finally, total exhaustion that barely allowed for a few hours of restless sleep. He found Jessica sitting between the 2 beds, reading a story. The twins, already in pajamas and with their teeth brushed, a miracle in itself, listened to her with absolute attention. Robert stood at the threshold, not wanting to interrupt. And then, Jessica narrated, changing her voice for each character. The brave rabbit said to the moon, "I'm not afraid of the dark, because I know you'll always be up there, watching over me with your silver light." Liam yawned, his eyelids growing heavier. Leo was already curled up against his pillow, though he was still fighting to keep his eyes open. The moon smiled at the rabbit, Jessica continued, her voice now a melodic whisper, and enveloped him in an embrace of soft light, like a shimmering blanket that would protect him until dawn. Robert held his breath as he witnessed something that seemed impossible. His children, his restless, sleepless twins, peacefully succumbing to sleep, without tears, without a struggle. Just the natural rhythm of childhood tiredness after a day full of activities. Jessica continued the story for a few more minutes, making sure both were deeply asleep. Then, with delicate movements, she adjusted the blankets around each child and silently stood up. Only then did she notice Robert at the door. They exchanged a glance in the dim light, illuminated only by the small night light. No words were needed. Robert felt an intense emotion he couldn't name, a lump in his throat that prevented him from speaking. With a gesture, he invited Jessica out of the room. "How?" he began when they were in the hallway, his voice a surprised whisper. Jessica smiled, a tired but satisfied smile. "I wore them out," she replied simply. They needed to expend that accumulated energy, that anxiety. Children express with their bodies what they can't put into words. 3 professional nannies couldn't achieve this, Robert murmured, looking through the ajar door where his children slept peacefully. Perhaps because they were too busy being professional, Jessica suggested. Sometimes children need simplicity. They need to feel safe, not perfect. Robert observed her in the dim hallway light. Without the filter of constant worry, he could truly appreciate her for the first time. She wasn't conventionally beautiful by the standards of the women he usually associated with, but there was something luminous about her, an authenticity that was more attractive than any manufactured perfection. "You'll stay, won't you?" he asked, surprised to hear the vulnerability in his own voice. "I mean, the position is yours if you want it." Jessica seemed to consider it for a moment, as if she were evaluating something beyond the job offer. "I'll stay," she finally replied. "The children need me, and I need you too," Robert thought, though he didn't dare say it aloud. "Good," he said instead. "Chloe will show you your room in the staff wing. Unless you prefer, we can prepare a room for you near the children if you deem it necessary." "The staff wing is fine," she replied firmly. "As I said, clear boundaries." Robert nodded, respecting her professionalism. "Of course, we'll discuss the contract terms tomorrow. Salary, days off, benefits." Jessica stopped him with a gentle gesture. "Mr. Maxwell, it's been a long day for everyone. Perhaps you should also rest. Let's take advantage of the children being asleep." There was a gentleness in her reproach that would disarm even the toughest negotiator. Robert found himself smiling, a genuine smile that hadn't appeared on his face in a long time. "You're right. Good night, Jessica." "Good night, Mr. Maxwell." Robert watched her walk down the hallway, her simple yet dignified figure against the luxurious backdrop of his mansion. It was as if she belonged to another world, perhaps more authentic than his own. That night, for the first time in months, Robert Maxwell slept 8 hours straight, without waking with a start to the sound of his children's crying. When the dawn light began to filter through his bedroom curtains, he had a moment of panic, thinking something was wrong. How could he have slept so long? He got up quickly and ran to the twins' room, only to find them still deeply asleep, with peaceful expressions he hadn't seen on their faces since before. He leaned against the doorframe, watching them breathe rhythmically. A strange feeling washed over him, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something else he couldn't or wouldn't identify. Something that had to do with the young woman who had brought this peace to his home. He returned to his room, and for the first time in years, allowed himself the luxury of getting back into bed after waking up. Not to sleep, but to stare at the ceiling and reflect on how, in just one day, a stranger from a small town had managed to transform the energy of his home. It was too soon to feel hope, he told himself. Too soon to let down his guard. But as he listened to the peaceful silence of the morning, Robert Maxwell recognized that something had changed within him. And that change had a name: Jessica Miller. Do you think Robert is falling for Jessica? What are the biggest challenges they might face if their relationship turns romantic? Share your predictions in the comments. The following weeks brought a gradual but undeniable transformation to the Maxwell mansion. The twins flourished under Jessica's care, developing healthy routines that included not only sleeping through the night, but also regular schedules for eating, playing, and learning. The house, once a tense space filled with crying and frustration, now resonated with children's laughter and lively conversations. For Robert, the most significant change was rediscovering his own children. With proper rest, his mind was clearer, his patience restored. He began to come home early from work some afternoons, something unthinkable months ago, drawn by the dynamic Jessica had created with Leo and Liam. One Friday afternoon, Robert returned home to find the main foyer filled with what looked like makeshift tents made of bed sheets. "What is this?" he asked James, who appeared with his usual silent efficiency. "Miss Jessica has organized an expedition, sir," the butler explained with a slight smile that betrayed his usual composure. "The young masters are exploring the Amazon rainforest, as I understand it." Robert put down his briefcase and loosened his tie, intrigued. Following the sounds of laughter and fictional animal roars, he found Jessica and the twins in the main living room, now transformed into a jungle landscape thanks to strategically relocated indoor plants, animal drawings hanging on the walls, and what looked like a waterfall made of blue cellophane. "Dad!" Liam shouted when he saw him. "We're in the jungle!" "I'm a jaguar," Leo roared, jumping from behind a sofa with a painted cardboard mask. Jessica, kneeling next to what appeared to be a base camp made of cushions, greeted him with a slightly embarrassed smile. "Sorry for the mess, Mr. Maxwell. I promise everything will be back in place before dinner." "Don't apologize," he replied, surprising himself. "It's wonderful." And it was. Seeing his children so engaged, so happy, was worth more than any impeccable decor or any artificial order. "Come explore with us, Daddy," Leo pleaded, pulling his hand. "We need a brave explorer." Before, Robert would have found an elegant excuse. He would have promised to join later, knowing he never would. He would have returned to his study, to his emails, to his adult world where he had total control. But something had changed in him. "Give me 5 minutes to change," he replied, surprising both the children and Jessica. "An explorer can't go into the jungle in a suit and tie, can he?" Jessica's eyes lit up with something that seemed like approval, and for some reason, that look gave him an inexplicable satisfaction. When he returned in jeans and a casual t-shirt he almost never wore, the twins greeted him with shouts of joy. Jessica handed him an explorer's hat made of newspaper. "Welcome to the expedition, Mr. Maxwell," she said, with a formal tone that comically contrasted with the situation. "We're about to discover an unknown species of butterfly." For the next hour, Robert Maxwell, the man whose competitors trembled in boardrooms, crawled under tables. He hid behind curtains and roared like a jaguar chasing his cubs through the jungle of his own living room. When they finally captured the butterfly, a beautiful hand-painted paper cutout by Jessica, he collapsed on the floor next to the children, breathless, but strangely happy. "You're very good at roaring, Daddy," Liam commented with professional seriousness. "The best jaguar," Leo agreed. Jessica watched them from the side. With a smile she tried to contain, but that spilled over into her eyes. When their gazes met, Robert felt a connection that went beyond gratitude for taking good care of his children. "Will you join us for dinner?" he asked impulsively. Jessica seemed surprised. "For dinner? I generally eat with the staff." "Please," the twins insisted in unison, as if they had rehearsed. Something in Jessica's expression changed, a momentary vulnerability Robert had never seen in her. "If the children insist," she finally gave in. "It would be a pleasure." That night, during dinner, Robert observed Jessica interact with his children. The way she listened to them with genuine attention, how she gently guided them to use the correct utensils without embarrassing them, how she transformed every small lesson into a game. It wasn't just that she was good at her job. There was something more, an authenticity he hadn't found in the people around him for a long time. "Why did you choose to work with children?" he asked when the twins were distracted with dessert. Jessica considered the question for a moment, as she did with everything she was asked, demonstrating a respect for words that was unusual. "Because children live in the present," she finally replied. "They don't have hidden agendas. They don't hold grudges. If they're happy, they show it. If they're sad, too. There's an honesty in them that—" She stopped, as if fearing she had said too much. "That's missing in the adult world," Robert completed. She nodded, a silent communication passing between them. "And why did you leave your hometown?" he continued, genuinely interested. A shadow briefly crossed Jessica's face. "Sometimes we need to start over," she replied, her tone indicating she didn't wish to delve deeper. "Los Angeles offers opportunities my hometown doesn't." Robert recognized the limits and didn't insist. There was something in her past that Jessica wasn't ready to share, and he, more than anyone, understood the need to keep certain doors closed. After dinner, when the twins were ready for bed, Robert joined the nightly routine for the first time. He watched as Jessica read a story, sang a soft lullaby from her hometown, and finally, blessed each child with a gesture that seemed part tradition, part personal ritual. A small cross on the forehead, followed by a gentle kiss on each cheek. "It's to scare away bad dreams," she explained in a whisper when the children were deeply asleep. "My grandmother used to do it with me." They left the room together, walking in comfortable silence down the dimly lit hallway. "Thank you," Robert said finally, "not just for getting them to sleep, for everything." Jessica looked at him with an intensity that disconcerted him. "They are wonderful children, Mr. Maxwell. They just needed someone to truly listen to them." "Robert," he said, "please call me Robert when we're alone. Mr. Maxwell makes me feel like my father." She seemed to consider the request, weighing the implications of that small familiarity. "Robert," she finally tried, and the sound of his name on Jessica's lips produced an inexplicable reaction in him, a warmth that spread from his chest. "Jessica," he replied, as if sealing a pact. They looked at each other for a moment that stretched beyond professional appropriateness. Robert had the sudden impulse to draw closer, to break that carefully maintained distance between them. But Jessica took a step back, almost imperceptibly. "You should rest," she said, formality returning to her tone. "Tomorrow the children want to go to the Los Angeles Zoo, if you allow it." The spell was broken, but something had been left floating between them, a possibility. "Of course," Robert replied. "In fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to accompany you." The surprise on Jessica's face was evident. "You don't work on Saturdays?" "Some things are more important than work," he replied, surprising himself with the sincerity of his words. The smile Jessica gave him then made it worth canceling the meeting he actually had scheduled for the next day. "The children will be delighted," she said. "Good night, Robert." "Good night, Jessica." He watched her walk away down the hallway, her simple yet graceful figure against the ostentatious luxury of his mansion. When she disappeared from his sight, Robert remained still, processing the contradictory feelings stirring within him. He had promised not to get emotionally involved again after being left alone with two small children. He had built walls around his heart, taking refuge in work, in responsibilities, in the idea that his only duty was to provide for his children and protect them. And yet, there he was, feeling those walls begin to crack because of a young woman from a small town who had come into his life by chance. "It's just gratitude," he told himself as he returned to his room. "Gratitude, because she has brought peace to this house." But deep down, Robert Maxwell knew he was lying. What he felt when he saw Jessica interact with his children, when he heard her speak with that mix of wisdom and simplicity, when he observed the light in her eyes when she smiled, went far beyond simple gratitude. And that terrified him. What do you think is going to happen between Robert and Jessica? Will they acknowledge their growing feelings? Let us know your predictions in the comments. The Los Angeles Zoo buzzed with activity that Saturday. Entire families walked the paths. Children excitedly pointed at animals. Vendors offered cotton candy and colorful balloons. Amidst the crowd, the Maxwells presented an unusual sight. A clearly wealthy man, though dressed in studied simplicity, two identical boys jumping with excitement, and a young woman whose simple clothes contrasted with the confidence of her movements. For Robert, the experience was almost surreal. He couldn't remember the last time he had visited a public place without the protection of VIP reserved areas or discreet bodyguards. He had insisted on driving himself, leaving his chauffeur at home, in an impulse of normalcy that now, surrounded by the popular hustle and bustle, provoked contradictory feelings. "Daddy, look at the monkeys!" Leo exclaimed, tugging at his hand with enthusiasm. "They look like you when you're angry," Liam added with a giggle, making Jessica cover her smile with a hand. "Oh, really?" Robert replied, feigning indignation as he lifted Liam into his arms. "And what if the monkey throws you into the moat?" His children's laughter, clear and carefree, attracted smiling glances from nearby families. For the first time in years, Robert didn't feel observed as the millionaire businessman, but simply as a father enjoying time with his children. It was liberating. Jessica walked beside him, maintaining a professional distance but close enough to intervene if the twins got overexcited. Robert discreetly observed her, captivated by the natural way she carried herself. She wore her hair loose today, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and wore simple jeans with an embroidered blouse that evidently came from her hometown. She wore no makeup, except perhaps a touch of lip gloss. She was so different from the women he usually associated with that he found her fascinating. "Is something wrong?" she asked, surprising him in his observation. "No, nothing," he replied, averting his gaze. "I was just thinking that you look different today." Jessica blushed slightly, and that natural blush seemed more beautiful to Robert than any expensive cosmetic. "It's my day off, technically," she explained, "even though I'm here with you. I appreciate you agreeing to come," he said sincerely. "I wouldn't have known how to handle the twins by myself in this place." She gave him an evaluating look. "I think you underestimate yourself, Robert. You're a better father than you think." Something in the way she pronounced his name, with that mix of respect and familiarity, sparked a warmth in his chest. The morning passed among animal exhibits, ice creams melting under the sun, and Robert discovering facets of his children he didn't know. Leo's fascination with reptiles, the way Liam perfectly imitated the sound of lions, the way both competed to impress Jessica with animal facts they had learned with her. "They've been studying a zoology book," Jessica explained when Robert expressed his surprise at the twins' knowledge. "They are incredibly intelligent. They just need someone to feed their curiosity." "You do," he replied, with a tone that went beyond simple professional acknowledgement. Their gazes briefly met, a silent current passing between them, until the excited shouts of the twins in front of the tiger habitat broke the moment. At midday, they had a picnic in a green area of the park. Jessica had prepared a basket with sandwiches, cut fruit, and natural juice, rejecting Robert's suggestion to take them to some exclusive restaurant. "The children need this," she had insisted. "Simplicity, contact with nature. Not always the most expensive is the best for them." Now, as he watched his children devour homemade sandwiches on a blanket spread on the grass, with more appetite than they had ever shown in Michelin-starred restaurants, Robert recognized that Jessica was right. "I've never had a picnic before," he confessed, nibbling on his ham and cheese sandwich, surprisingly delicious in its simplicity. Jessica looked at him in astonishment. "Never? Not even as a child?" Robert shook his head. "My family wasn't like that. My father believed that success meant staying away from the common, from the popular. Parks were for those who couldn't afford private clubs." "And you believe that too?" she asked, her tone free of judgment, only genuine curiosity. Robert watched his children, now chasing a butterfly a few feet from the blanket, their laughter mingling with that of other children nearby. Then he looked at the sandwich in his hand, the juice in a simple plastic cup, the colorful patterned blanket on the grass. "No," he replied with surprising certainty. "I think I was wrong about many things." The smile Jessica gave him then was worth more than any $1 million business deal. After lunch, while the twins spent their last energies in a playground, Robert and Jessica sat on a nearby bench, watching them. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" she asked, confused. "For showing me this," he replied, gesturing to encompass everything. The park, the playing children, the simple but perfect afternoon. "For teaching me to be a father." Jessica gently shook her head. "I didn't teach you anything. I just reminded you of what you already knew. Sometimes we get so lost in our responsibilities that we forget the simple things. To be present." "You are very wise for only being 28, Robert commented with a smile. "And you are very dense for being so successful," she retorted, with a flash of humor in her eyes. Robert burst out laughing, surprised by her audacity. "Touché. I guess I deserve that." A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the twins go up and down a slide. "Jessica," Robert began, gathering courage for something he had been considering all morning. "There's a charity gala next Friday. It's to raise funds for schools in underserved areas. I usually bring the children with a nanny, but I was wondering if you'd like to accompany us, as a guest, not as an employee." The surprise on Jessica's face was evident. She remained still, her eyes fixed on the children, though Robert doubted she was actually seeing them at that moment. "It wouldn't be appropriate," she finally replied in a low voice. "Why not?" he insisted, though he already knew the answer. Jessica turned to him, her expression serious. "Because I am your employee, Robert. Because people would talk. Because it would send a confusing message to the children. What if I didn't care what people said?" A sad smile appeared on Jessica's lips. "But you do care, and you should care. Your position, your image, are part of who you are." "That's not true," he protested. "That doesn't define me." "Perhaps not. But it defines the world you live in, the world your children will grow up in," she replied softly. "I appreciate the invitation, truly, but it wouldn't be right." Before Robert could insist, Leo came running, his face lit up with excitement. "Daddy, Jessica! Liam got stuck in the tunnel and doesn't want to come out." The moment broke. Jessica immediately stood up, professional as ever, and followed Leo towards the playground. Robert followed, with a mix of frustration and admiration for Jessica's firmness. The rest of the afternoon passed without further mention of the rejected invitation, but something had changed between them. A line had been drawn, acknowledged, and Robert wasn't sure if he should respect it or try to cross it. On the way back to this mansion, with the twins asleep in the back seat, exhausted after a day of adventures, the silence in the car was eloquent. "What you said at the park," Robert began, keeping his voice low so as not to wake the children. "About me caring what people think." "It wasn't a criticism," Jessica clarified quickly. "Just an observation." "I know, but it made me think." He paused, searching for the right words. "For years I've lived worried about appearances, about meeting expectations. Mine, my father's, society's, and I hadn't realized how much of that I was transmitting to my children." Jessica listened intently, her soft profile intermittently illuminated by the streetlights. "I don't want them to grow up like that," he continued. "I don't want them to think that a person's worth is in their bank account, in their last name, or in how exclusive the places they frequent are." "You're a good father, Robert," Jessica said softly. "Your children know you love them. That's what they'll remember, not lessons about social status." "Thanks to you," he replied. "Before you came, I was so lost, so focused on maintaining control that I forgot the essential." When they arrived at the mansion, Robert insisted on carrying Liam himself, while Jessica carried Leo. They carried them silently up to their room, changed them into their pajamas, and put them to bed with synchronized movements that spoke of a routine developed together. As they left the children's room, they stopped in the hallway, as they had done so many other nights. "About the gala," Jessica began. "You don't have to explain yourself," Robert interrupted her. "I understand your reasons, and I respect them." "Thank you," she replied with evident relief. "It's important for me to maintain certain boundaries." "I know." They looked at each other in the dim hallway, and Robert felt that connection again, that silent understanding that went beyond words. "Good night, Robert," Jessica finally said, breaking the moment. "Good night, Jessica." He watched her walk away down the hallway, as many other nights, but this time, with the certainty that his feelings had crossed a line of no return. It was no longer just admiration or gratitude he felt for his children's nanny. It was something much deeper, much more terrifying, and absolutely inappropriate, according to all the social rules he had respected his entire life. That night, as he stared at his bedroom ceiling, Robert Maxwell faced an uncomfortable truth. He was falling in love with Jessica Miller, and he had no idea what to do about it. What do you think Jessica's personal matters were that day? And what do you hope happens next between her and Robert? Let us know in the comments. Thursday afternoon, the Maxwell mansion was unusually quiet. The twins had gone out with James and another employee to a children's theater show, an outing planned by Jessica to give them new cultural experiences. The nanny, however, had not accompanied them. For the first time since her arrival, she had asked for the afternoon off for personal matters. Robert was in his study, trying to concentrate on the financial reports on his screen. But his mind constantly wandered. Jessica's rejection of his invitation to the charity gala still weighed on him, not so much because of the rejection itself, but because of what it implied. The insurmountable gap between their worlds. The main gate's doorbell rang, pulling him from his thoughts. Minutes later, Chloe, his personal assistant, and Jessica's aunt appeared at his study door. "Mr. Maxwell, forgive the interruption," she said, with a worried expression. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Chloe. What's wrong?" The woman closed the door behind her and approached the desk, visibly uncomfortable. "It's about Jessica," she began, carefully choosing her words. "Normally, I wouldn't interfere, but I'm worried." Robert felt a pang of unease. Is she all right? Has something happened? Physically, she's fine, but Chloe paused, as if considering whether she should continue. Today, she received a visit at the apartment she shares with me. A man from her hometown in Arizona, her ex-fiancé. Robert tried to maintain a neutral expression, though the word fiancé had caused a visceral reaction he struggled to control. He hadn't known Jessica was engaged. It was a complicated situation, Chloe explained. Ryan is the son of one of the most influential men in their town. The engagement was more or less arranged due to family pressure. Jessica broke up with him when she decided to come to the city, but he hasn't accepted the end of it. And why are you telling me this? Robert asked, maintaining a professional tone that didn't reflect the storm of emotions he felt. Chloe looked at him directly, with the frankness he had always valued in her. Because I've seen how you look at her, sir, and I've seen how she looks at you. Robert tensed, uncomfortable with such direct observation. Chloe, I appreciate your concern, but the relationship between Jessica and I is strictly professional. With all due respect, sir, we both know that's not entirely true, she replied softly. I'm not here to judge. Jessica is like a daughter to me, and I've seen how she's been working with your children, and with you. Robert remained silent, unable to deny the obvious. The reason I'm telling you this, Chloe continued, is because Ryan hasn't left. He's pressuring her to return to her hometown with him. And I'm worried that Jessica, out of loyalty to her family and her roots, might consider doing so. The idea of Jessica returning to her hometown, disappearing from their lives, filled Robert with a sense of emptiness that surprised him with its intensity. What can I do? He asked, finally abandoning the pretense of disinterest. Talk to her, Chloe simply replied. Jessica is proud and reserved. She would never tell you her personal problems because she fears appearing unprofessional. But right now, she needs to know that she has options, that her life here matters. Chloe stood up, having said what she needed to say. Jessica will be back in about an hour. She'll be in the back garden, near the greenhouse. She likes to sit there when she needs to think. When Chloe left, Robert remained still in his chair, processing the information. Jessica engaged. Jessica pressured to return to her hometown. Jessica, who had brought light and order to his chaotic family life, potentially disappearing from it. The thought was unbearable. An hour later, just as Chloe had predicted, Robert found Jessica sitting on a stone bench next to the mansion's small greenhouse. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair carelessly tied back, and her gaze was lost in the rose bushes she herself had helped revive in recent weeks. She looked beautiful and vulnerable at the same time, a combination that tightened something inside Robert's chest. May I join you? He asked. Approaching cautiously, Jessica startled slightly, but nodded, quickly composing her expression. Of course. Have the children returned from the theater yet? Not yet. Robert sat next to her, maintaining a respectful distance. How was your afternoon off? Good, she replied, too quickly. Just some pending matters. An awkward silence settled between them. Robert knew he had to be direct, but he searched for the right words. Jessica, Chloe told me about your visit today, he finally said. Jessica's face tensed, a mix of surprise and something akin to betrayal crossing her features. She shouldn't have done that, she murmured. These are personal matters that don't affect my work. She didn't tell me to gossip, Robert clarified. She's worried about you, and frankly, after hearing her, so am I. Jessica stood up, clearly uncomfortable. I appreciate the concern, but I can handle my own problems. I don't want my personal matters to interfere with my work here. Robert also stood up, feeling that if he let her walk away now, something important would be lost between them. I'm not speaking as your employer, Jessica. I'm speaking as someone who... He stopped, searching for the right words. someone who cares about you." She looked at him then, truly looked at him, with those amber eyes that seemed to see beyond the facades he had built for years. "Ryan wants me to go back to my hometown," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "He says my place is there, with him, with my family." "And do you want to go back?" Robert asked, dreading the answer. Jessica averted her gaze to the rose bushes. "When I came to Los Angeles, I was escaping. From expectations, from traditions, from a future others had planned for me." She paused. "But now I have reasons to stay. The children adore you," Robert said, his heart pounding. "I don't know what we'd do without you." "It's not just for the children," Jessica replied, gathering courage to look at him again. "And that's what scares me." The honesty in her words, the vulnerability she showed, broke down the last barriers Robert had tried to maintain. "It scares me too," he confessed, "because I never expected to feel this again. Because it's complicated. Because there are 1,000 reasons why it shouldn't work. And yet—" "We can't," Jessica interrupted, though her voice lacked conviction. "I'm your children's nanny. We come from completely different worlds." "People would talk." "People always talk," Robert responded, taking a step closer. "But for the first time in my life, I don't care what they say." "You should care," she insisted. "You have a position, an image, responsibilities." "My only real responsibility is to my children, and I've never seen them happier than since you arrived." Another step towards her. "You didn't just teach them to sleep, Jessica. You taught us to live again." Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes, and Robert felt the almost irresistible urge to move closer, to eliminate the distance between them. But he held back, respecting the decision she had to make. "I can't offer you a conventional future," he continued, his voice heavy with emotion. "I can't promise you it will be easy. But I can promise you I've never cared about anyone as much as I care about you. And it's not gratitude. It's not just because you're wonderful with my children. It's because you are you, Jessica. Simply, you." A tear rolled down Jessica's cheek. Robert raised his hand hesitantly, and when she didn't pull away, he gently wiped it with his thumb. "If you decide to go back to your hometown, I'll understand," he said, though the idea was painful to him. "But I want you to know that you have a place here, not just as my children's nanny, but as—" He stopped, recognizing he was moving too fast. "As whatever you want us to be." Jessica closed her eyes for a moment, as if processing his words, the touch of his hand still on her cheek. "I'm scared," she finally confessed. "Not of you, but of myself. Of wanting something that seems impossible." "What's impossible, Jessica?" Robert asked softly. She opened her eyes, and in them, Robert saw a decision forming, a courage being born. "The impossible is pretending I don't feel anything when I'm with you," she replied, her voice trembling but firm. "The impossible is imagining leaving this house, leaving the children, leaving you." The world seemed to stop around them. The garden, the mansion, all of Los Angeles disappeared, leaving only that moment suspended between two people who, against all odds, had found something invaluable in each other. Robert finally closed the distance between them, leaning in slowly, giving Jessica time to pull back if she wished. But she remained motionless, her gaze fixed on his, until their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss, like a question. Jessica's response was immediate, her hands rising to Robert's shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, transforming into something that expressed everything they had contained for weeks. Desire, fear, hope, and a deeper feeling neither was ready to name. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Robert rested his forehead against Jessica's. "Stay," he whispered. "Not as an employee, not out of obligation. Stay because you want to be here. With me. With us." Jessica nodded slowly, a smile forming on her lips. "I'm staying," she replied, sealing her decision with another brief kiss. "But we'll have to figure out how to make it work. For the children." "For the children," Robert agreed. "And for us." The sound of children's voices and approaching footsteps broke the moment. The twins were returning from the theater. Jessica pulled away slightly, but Robert took her hand, intertwining their fingers with hers. "Ready?" he asked, with a meaning that went far beyond facing the children at that moment. Jessica squeezed his hand, her smile illuminating her entire face. "Ready." Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the unexpected turns love can take. 6 months later, the transformation of the Maxwell mansion was evident to anyone who had known it before. The curtains, once always closed, now let in abundant natural light. The walls, previously adorned with abstract and expensive art, had been partially replaced by colorful children's drawings, framed with the same care as collector's pieces. And the solemn silence that once dominated the place had given way to laughter, conversations, and occasionally, traditional folk music from Jessica's hometown. But the deepest change was not in the decor, but in its inhabitants. Robert Maxwell was finishing a video conference in his study when the door opened without warning, and 2 identical whirlwinds burst into the room. "Daddy, it's all ready!" Leo exclaimed, jumping onto his lap without ceremony. "Jessica says we can show you the surprise now," Liam added, tugging at his hand impatiently. Robert feigned seriousness to his colleagues on screen. "Gentlemen, it seems I have an urgent matter to attend to. We'll continue tomorrow." The executives on screen smiled knowingly before signing off. Robert Maxwell's reputation had changed as much as the man himself. He was still respected for his business acumen, but he was no longer feared for his coldness. The real estate shark had become humanized, to the surprise of the entire California business world. Letting himself be guided by his sons, now 5 years old and brimming with healthy energy, Robert walked towards the back garden. As he crossed the threshold of the door, he stopped dead, marveling. The entire garden had been transformed into a small, vibrant village fair. Colorful lanterns hung between the trees. Tables covered with hand-embroidered tablecloths overflowed with traditional dishes. And in the center, a small stage where musicians with traditional instruments prepared to play. Jessica, radiant in a traditional dress of vibrant colors, advanced towards him with a smile that illuminated her entire face. "Happy anniversary," she said, standing on tiptoes to kiss him softly. 6 months since our first kiss. Robert wrapped her in his arms, still amazed by Jessica's ability to surprise him. "It's wonderful," he murmured against her hair. "How did you organize all this?" "With help," she replied, gesturing to Chloe, James, and the rest of the staff, all dressed in festive clothes. "We wanted to celebrate not only our 6 months, but everything that has changed." The twins ran towards them, pulling both their hands to show them every detail of the celebration. Robert let himself be led, his heart full, seeing what his life had become. The party was intimate, but vibrant. The twins, dressed in small embroidered shirts, danced with Jessica, following the steps she had taught them. Robert watched them from a table, chatting with Chloe. "I never imagined my niece would bring so much happiness to this house," the woman commented, with evident pride. "To you and the children. She changed everything," Robert replied sincerely. "She taught me what really matters." "You know?" Chloe continued with a knowing smile. "In our culture, we have a saying, when a soul finds its way back to the light, the whole universe celebrates." Jessica was lost when she came to the city, fleeing others' expectations. You were lost in your grief and responsibilities, and yet, you found each other. Robert reflected on those words as he watched Jessica laughing with his children. The transformation had been mutual. He had offered her a new beginning, away from the traditional pressures of her hometown. She had taught him to live again, to be the father his children needed. When the music changed to a slower rhythm, Robert approached them. "Would you grant me this dance?" he asked Jessica, extending his hand. "I want to dance with Jessica too," Leo protested. "Me too," Liam joined in. Jessica knelt in front of them with a smile. "First I'll dance with your daddy, and then with you two, my princes. How does that sound?" The twins nodded, satisfied with the compromise. As they danced under the colorful lights, Robert held Jessica close to his heart, marveling at how this simple woman had rebuilt his entire world from the ground up. "I have something for you," he said, pulling away slightly to take a small box from his pocket. "I was going to wait until after dinner, but I think this is the perfect moment." Jessica looked at him with curiosity as she opened the box, revealing a beautiful ring with an amber stone surrounded by small diamonds. "I chose amber because it reminds me of your eyes," Robert explained, his voice slightly trembling. "The first time I saw you, that's what struck me most. The warmth in your gaze when you spoke to my children." Jessica gazed at the ring wordlessly, her eyes moistening. "It's not an engagement ring," he continued. "Not yet. I know it's too soon, and I want to do things right. It's a promise that I'll be here, patient, until you're ready." "Robert," she began, but was interrupted by the twins, who had crept closer and were now staring at the ring with huge eyes. "Are you going to ask her to marry you, Daddy?" Liam asked with total innocence. "Yes," Leo exclaimed excitedly. "Say yes, Jessica, then you'll be our mommy forever." Jessica and Robert exchanged surprised glances. They had never talked to the children about marriage, aware that they needed to handle their relationship delicately for the boys' sake. "Children, Jessica and I are," Robert began, searching for the right words. "Actually," Jessica interrupted, kneeling to be at eye level with the twins, "there's something I need to tell you first. All three of you." She looked at each one, took a deep breath, and continued. "A few weeks ago, I started feeling different. At first, I thought it was all the excitement in our lives, but then," she directed a special look at Robert. "I went to the doctor yesterday while you were at school." Robert stared at her, barely daring to hope what her words seemed to suggest. "In about 7 months," Jessica continued, taking the twins' hands, "you two are going to have a little brother or sister." The silence that followed lasted barely a second before the twins erupted in shouts of joy. Robert, momentarily paralyzed by surprise, finally reacted by hugging Jessica so tightly he almost lifted her off the ground. "Is it true?" he whispered against her ear, his voice broken by emotion. "Are we having a baby?" Jessica nodded, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. "I wanted to find the perfect moment to tell you. And then you planned this party, and you brought out that ring." Robert kissed her, a kiss full of promises and future, barely aware of the applause and cheers that erupted around them as the staff understood what was happening. "I think this changes things," he said, when they finally separated, both breathless and smiling. He then knelt, still holding the ring, but this time with a different purpose. "Jessica Miller, you have taught me to be a father, to be a man, to be human again. You brought light where there was only darkness, sleep where there was only insomnia, and love where there was only duty." He paused, looking at the twins who watched fascinated. "All three of us want you in our lives forever. Will you do us the honor of marrying me, of officially becoming the mother of our children, of forming this family that began the night you stumbled into my broken hearts and mended them?" Jessica, radiant despite the tears, nodded before she could find her voice. "Yes," she finally replied. "Yes to everything." The twins joined the hug as Robert slipped the ring onto Jessica's finger. The staff applauded, Chloe cried discreetly, and the musicians began to play a traditional celebratory melody. Please, like this video if you were moved by this beautiful ending, and share your thoughts on this incredible journey in the comments. 1 year later, the private beach in Puerto Escondido, Mexico, shimmered under the midday sun. Robert, dressed in a white guayabera and light trousers, waited under an arch of tropical flowers. Beside him, Leo and Liam, now 6 years old, stood surprisingly still in their small matching suits, each holding a small cushion with a wedding ring. Traditional Oaxacan music announced the bride's arrival. Jessica advanced across the sand, barefoot and radiant, in a lace dress that combined contemporary elegance with traditional Oaxacan details. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in a hand-embroidered blanket. Lily, barely 3 months old, slept peacefully against her mother's chest. The ceremony was brief, but deeply emotional. When it was time for the vows, Jessica gently passed the baby into Chloe's arms and took Robert's hands. "A year and a half ago, I entered your house as just an employee," she began, her voice clear and steady. "I was escaping an imposed future, looking for my own path. I never imagined that path would lead me to you, to the children, to this family that is now my home." Robert squeezed her hands, visibly moved. "And I never imagined that the solution for my children to sleep peacefully would be to find love again," he replied. "You taught me that second chances exist, that happiness is not a luxury but a right, and that sometimes what we need most comes from where we least expect it." When they exchanged rings, with the somewhat clumsy but enthusiastic help of the twins, Robert pulled Jessica close for the kiss that would seal their union. As they separated, both looked at the 3 children who now formed their family, the twins, who had finally found the emotional security they so desperately needed, and little Lily, the living symbol of their love. That night, after the guests had left, and the children were deeply asleep, Robert and Jessica gazed at the ocean from the villa's terrace. "You know what's most ironic?" Robert commented, hugging her from behind. "I hired a nanny so my children could sleep, and I ended up falling so in love that now I have a newborn who wakes me up every 3 hours." Jessica laughed softly, leaning against his chest. "Life has an interesting sense of humor," she replied. "I escaped an arranged marriage in my hometown to end up marrying for love on a beach in Oaxaca." They turned to hear Lily's soft cry through the baby monitor. They exchanged a knowing glance. "I'll go," Robert said, kissing her forehead. "You rest." As she watched him walk away, Jessica reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. From nanny to wife, from employee to mother of 3 children, from a frightened young woman fleeing others' expectations to a woman who had found her place in the world. And it had all begun with sleepless twins and a widowed millionaire who had forgotten how to live. Some would call it destiny. Jessica preferred to call it a miracle. Lesson learned. This story beautifully illustrates that true fulfillment often comes from unexpected places, disguised as challenges. It teaches us that patience, presence, and genuine connection can heal old wounds and build new foundations, even stronger than before. Robert learned that wealth couldn't buy happiness or peace, and Jessica found her true worth and love by embracing her authentic self and helping others. It's a reminder that the greatest treasures in life are found in genuine relationships and the courage to open your heart to new possibilities, no matter how unconventional they may seem.